Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is my magnificent 1963 Plymouth Valiant Signet 200 Turbo Slant 6 project. Never mind the fact that the tires are going flat and it's almost parked in a slough. Last time you saw this thing, it ran. It didn't drive, but it did run. It barely started, which is this whole other thing. Ooh, rainbow. At the tail end of the last video, I did figure out that if I turn the timing control in the atomic system off, it does actually usually kind of sort of start. See? Off camera, I had to move the car, and because it was outside, I think this controller thingy under the hood died. So I probably need one of those now. Also in the last video, many eagle-eyed viewers noticed the smoke pouring out of the thermostat housing hole. Yeah, this thing needs a head gasket, and it's not because of boost. It needed it the whole time. I just chose to ignore that. So today, if the transmission will keep working, always with the smoke. Anyway, I'm gonna try and put a head gasket and studs in this thing. Oh, my turbo oil feed line leaks too. So basically, we're off to a tremendous start. Definitely looking forward to cleaning this off the floor later. Yeah, still need to fix that transmission shift cable O-ring. What do you think of this ridiculous stance? I kind of like it. Okay, the nose could come down a little. Yes? Oh yeah, remind me the brakes are terrible later. By the end of this video, I'm gonna drive this car on the road, unless horrible things happen. Let's see. I got a lot, and I mean a lot of comments on the last episode, many of which I'd like to respond to, but I got better things to do. A large number of them had to do with my engine mount solution. As you can see, it's already done, and it works great. And I wasn't asking for your suggestions, so thanks, I guess. I did get a couple good suggestions for sealing the awful weld on the oil pan, and I may well be using one of those later. At least a couple commenters suggested installing a mini starter to make more room. Okay, done. One commenter was very concerned about intake air temperatures, apparently forgetting that from the factory, the exhaust is directly connected to the Slant 6 intake manifold right here. I think it's gonna be fine. I am slightly worried about these loose bolts, but we'll deal with that later. One commenter said to lose the T-bolts on the valve cover. No, I think they're awesome. And they're one of the things that's gonna make this job easy, because I can have this cover off in like a minute. At least once I get the charge pipe out of the way. I did have a very helpful comment from Dr. Art, who reminded me that rotor phasing is a very important thing with the MSD atomic system. I actually know that because I've dealt with it before. I had to phase a rotor in an MSD type distributor on a Dodge Challenger years ago when I owned an actual shop. I knew that I'd have to check that. It just didn't occur to me that it could be so bad as to cause this thing to start like garbage. Pretty sure that's the issue, and we're gonna get to that. If you've been following this project since the beginning, you know I've gone to pretty great lengths to make this serviceable. I've removed certain components strategically and rearranged things just to make it easy to work on. And here's why. 6.5 minutes after I started, the charge pipes are out, the belt is off, the alternator bracket's off, the valve cover's out, the plugs, wires, and cap are off, the heater hoses are out of the way. I'm ready to pop the alternator mount bracket off, pull the manifolds off and leave them sitting here slightly off the head, then remove the rocker gear and push rods, pop the head bolts out, and out she comes. Of course, when I simply say pop the manifolds off nonchalantly, that makes the operation sound a lot easier than it is. But still, it's straightforward. All right, 24 minutes to get the manifolds loose and the rocker gear and push rods off and out. I've only just realized, with the exhaust manifold staying put, which is my goal here since it's braced and attached to the turbo, of course, I'm gonna have to slide the cylinder head out and then back in, and that's okay, except for that whole head stud thing. So I guess I'm gonna have to spin the studs in after the fact with the head in place. And that's unfortunate, but I think it'll still work fine. I've definitely had comments on previous episodes of this project informing me that I'll have nothing but head gasket problems. And yeah, they're probably right, but hopefully the new gasket and the studs will alleviate that situation. Of course, this is a 4-bolt per cylinder design, which is not optimal. Certainly not ideal for boost, but it's what we've got to work with. I will tell you, it's been done before. Head's ready to come off, so I popped the block drain out and let all the coolant out before I dump it into the cylinders. That's always annoying. I've just remembered that Slant 6 heads are heavy, and I'm doing this by myself, so that's great. Anyway, happened, but it's off. That's an original steel shim head gasket. And I don't know, maybe it's okay. Hopefully it's not okay. You know, I was seeing some nasty smoke coming out of the thermostat housing, so I'm really hoping to find something bad here. With any instance of suspected head gasket failure, it's your job as a mechanic to confirm that, because if you're wrong and you just throw a new head gasket in, you may not have fixed the problem. You could have a head issue or a crack somewhere. So that's what I'm doing now, trying to confirm the failure. I'm looking for any weird coloration, any broken spots in the gasket, burn spots, things of that nature. So far, all I see is a little weird coloration around number 1 and a little bit around number 6. I do have matching marks on the cylinder head. This looks kind of funky, but the ring around the combustion chamber looks unbroken, and there's no pattern of scorch mark or anything like that. The middle cylinders all look pretty even. That looks pretty good. The rear cylinder, number 6, I do notice different coloration here. You can see it's shinier, like it almost has a gold color, unlike the rest of these. So I don't know if that's evidence that exhaust was coming through here or what the deal is. There is a mark here, which I swear I didn't do. The only other thing that's odd is this. It's a little chunk of, well, it almost looks like steel. I don't know. There's a matching mark on the head gasket, and again, I kind of thought it might have been my fault taking this thing apart, but no, there's something here. And of course, this is a water port, so if combustion was able to get through here because that was lifting the gasket, that would explain it. But there's no evidence of that. The ring looks complete. Again, no scorch marks, so I don't know what the deal is. Oh, and let it be noted, this thing was running horribly, horribly rich. And I don't know why that is. Well, I do know why that is. MSD Atomic EFI. More on that later, I guess. Notice the happy little pools of gasoline in the intake manifold? Yeah, I have some concerns about that. Apparently, the injectors in the MSD Atomic system are not replaceable. I really think they're too big for this application. Their documentation swears up and down that these injectors should be able to handle a 100 cubic inch engine. And of course, this one's 170, so we should be good, right? But I've already lowered the fuel pressure just about as far as it can possibly go, and still, this thing is mega rich at all times. So I might have a sensor issue, a horrible vacuum leak through a porous intake manifold. We'll deal with tuning issues later. Let's see if we can get this head sorted. So far, I'm not seeing much except the fire ring around number 6. I see a bunch of dark coloration here, like exhaust was moving this way toward crankcase. And that doesn't surprise me. It's something I keep seeing on small blocks. But my apparent issue here was not compression blowing into the crankcase. It was blowing into the cooling system. So that's what I'm looking for. That weird little tip mark was not my fault. There's a matching mark in the block, a little divot. That's very strange. I think I'm looking at the culprit here in number 6. Look at that weird coloration there going into that coolant port. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is where our issue was located. I really don't see anything else suspicious. The good news is the bores look about how I hoped they did. Slightly worn, but not totally destroyed. We've got a bit of ridge, but it's not too terrible. My hope here is that the rings are worn to the point that they're boost ready, but they'll hopefully still seal. Not today, but someday this engine will get a complete teardown and actual pistons and new rings with actual gaps and all the important things to make horsepower. Today is not that day. In truth, I've already gone farther than I had ever hoped to by this point in the project. I really wanted to do this build in stages. I wanted to gauge the efficacy of every mod. I wanted to test the power level naturally aspirated with the EFI, but it just wasn't feasible to do that. I wanted to test the power with just the turbo, with no other supporting mods. But it seemed like we had a blown head gasket, and, well, looking at it, it's not great. So the time to do something about that is now. Unfortunately, since the cylinder head's on the bench, now's kind of the time to do the mods I had in mind. So we're not getting the step-by-step, side-by-side comparison I hoped for. But this is going to kick the project up a couple notches in one go, and I'm excited about that. I'm not excited about the fact that this exhaust manifold refuses to seal. Just Slant 6 things. I need to get a Remflex gasket on order. Remind me to get a Remflex gasket on order. Matching up the ports on the Slant 6 with the manifolds can be a bit of a challenge, so I'm happy to report that here at the front, where I aligned this hole up with the stud, putting it roughly in the center, we had a really good matchup. There's essentially no port ghosting around the gasket ports there. Toward the back, not quite perfect. It's a little off. Actually, it looks like it's off this way. I happen to know that Aussie Speed, who make manifolds for the Slant 6, have a special tool for aligning the manifolds. I'm going to continue with my technique of just kind of randomly guessing because it seems to be close enough. Now, if you know anything about the Slant 6, you know that airflow through this head is challenging. It's really a terrible design for making power. But, of course, for this project, it's what we're stuck with. A running joke on the internet, and one I enjoy quite a bit, is that the way to fix airflow problems in your cylinder head is with boost. Unfortunately, that's not actually true. In fact, I've seen dyno tests proving that any improvements you can make to the airflow of your cylinder head will show under boost just as well as when naturally aspirated. I'm going to take this opportunity to port the Slant 6 cylinder head. Now, when I say porting, the ports themselves are actually pretty good. In fact, if you look at this gasket, the intake ports are already almost perfectly matched to it. You couldn't make them any bigger, that's for sure. The ports on the intake manifold side are actually slightly smaller. And that's okay. It would be bad to shove a larger port into a smaller port. The other way around is at least passable. It would be most ideal if the two could be matched, but we're not going there today. Eventually, I would really like to port match both of these manifolds. Well, actually, eventually I'd like to replace both of these manifolds, but that's this whole other thing. I've got quite a bit of experience with Chrysler castings, and I happen to know that these cylinder heads are terrible. So let's get the valves knocked out and see what we're dealing with in the bowl areas. All right, first I'm going to give it a cleaning because this is just gross. That little piece of whatever it was popped right off. And now I've got all the valve gear broken down, and we've got a naked cylinder head to work with. It doesn't take long looking at the Slant 6 head to realize where the issues are. It's really here where the valve seat blends into the bowl. There are just terrible ridges in every single one of those. So smoothing out those ridges is going to be job number one. Number two, of course, we'll dress the valve guide area here. It's got a sharp edge on it, and we don't want that. What I'm not going to do is hog these things out, try to increase the port sizes majorly, or anything like that. I just want to smooth out the factory terribleness. I have it on authority that due to the unique way these Slant 6 heads were cast, water lurks not far behind here. So I'm going to go to great lengths to make sure I don't find it. If I do ruin the cylinder head, well, I've got 3 more, so that's the good news. The bad news is I'm out of time for today, so we'll get back to this horrible mess tomorrow. It's the next day, and I've got a die grinder, a carbide bit, and a dream. I would never claim to be an expert at this, but I have watched a good few videos, and I've done it myself several times with acceptable results. I ported the heads in the Demon engine, and well, that car almost does wheelies, so that's cool. For some reason, I've never bought an electric die grinder. I have this pneumatic one that I got from somewhere. I'm sure it was free. I do actually have some nice carbides. These come from Mac Tools. I've never managed to ruin one yet. This is my favorite one, the Christmas tree looking carbide. I just find that it offers multiple shapes that help me get into these areas. If you gave 100 monkeys 100 die grinders, I bet just about all of them could do a prettier porting job than me. But pretty's not the point. I've got that horrible ridge knocked out of this first exhaust bowl, and it looks pretty decent. As you're doing this, make sure you stay away from the valve seat. You don't want to nick it. Ugh, that would be bad. I've probably got about 5 minutes in that first port. I'm going to go through and knock out all the exhaust ports, and then I'll move to the intakes. This is going to take a while. That's all it takes to knock down that main ridge. Then it's just a matter of blending everything in, smoothing it out, and knocking down the valve guide. Not bad. Not good, but not bad. Yeah, make sure you don't go in the valve guide either. That would be bad. Here's a word of the wise. Cover your smalls before you start grinding. Lots of cleaning in my future. All the exhausts are done, and I definitely don't want to talk about the nick in that seat. Nope, we're not going to talk about that. Moving on to intake. Okay, I certainly don't want to talk about the 3 nicks on this intake valve seat. Definitely do as I say, not as I do on that one. Anyway, done with porting, I think. These are pretty decent. Certainly better than when I started. Everything's nicely smoothed and the transitions are okay. I knocked down all the sharp edges right here, but I didn't remove a bunch of meat on that side. In general, they're nice free-flowing ports. I cleaned them up on this side. Mostly I knocked down some letters that were cast in and just some random imperfections. Man, I was gonna demonstrate a 3-angle valve job, but it turns out my new old crappy valve seat grinder is missing the pilot pins. So I can't do that. That's unfortunate. I might really need to grind a couple of these seats. Might just be the world's most difficult lapping job this time around. These different seat grinders help you get those 3 angles. Some people go off the rails with 5 angles or even 7 angles. 3 will help round the valve seat opening, and that can increase flow more than you might think. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that to this head. My old machine that I sold was almost just like this one, except it had all the requisite centering tools in here. Before I lap the valves, I'm going to prep them. That means checking them up in the drill press here, cleaning them with a wire brush, like so. Nice. And then on the intake valves, I'm going to back face them. That means taking off this little lip here. I'll do that with a file while they're running in the drill press here. On the exhaust valves, I'm going to slightly round the face right here. Of course, as the exhaust is exiting the chamber, it's going to run past the valve right there, and apparently rounding that edge off there can be beneficial. This is always fun. It doesn't taste fun. Finish it up with some sandpaper. That'll knock the big chunks off. Oh, by the way, don't play with power tools at home, kids. Be careful. And certainly don't wear gloves or jewelry if you get caught up in there. I don't know what these valves are made out of, but my file will hardly touch it. I did get that knocked down most of the way, and I'm pleased with that. But I got a bunch more valves to go, so yay. I grabbed one of the stones from my now basically useless hone set, and it kind of sort of does something. Can't remember having this much trouble grinding these before. Well, it's been a long day of occasionally working on this, but mostly doing other things. I got all the valves done, and now I've started lapping them. I've got cylinder 1 finished. You can see this nice, shiny, fresh seat there. The exhaust seats in this thing have little pits in them, and I'm not super excited about that, but I am seeing shiny lines in there. I've got a shiny line on the valve, so I think it's going to be all right. It's going to have to be because I'm putting it back together. I'm certainly not putting seats in this thing right now. Here's what all the valves ended up looking like. Again, I did back face these intakes. Almost that entire groove is gone. It really narrows the face of the valve quite a bit. And the exhaust, I tried to taper that edge there. It wasn't super effective. No tool I was using would really get into that material. So either way, they're cleaned up. I got all the chunks off and things are looking pretty good. I lap valves with a drill on the valve stem there, carefully locking it on and trying not to damage it in any way. I've had pretty good results with that. I used to use a length of rubber hose, but that's a giant pain to deal with, and this works okay, as long as you can get your drill to the valve stem. I use this multi-grind funky magic compound, and that seems to work okay. And yeah, it's just a bunch of patience. Spinning the thing, touching the compound to the seat, I'll back it off, I'll touch it again, I'll reverse a few times. After about a minute of that, you end up with a pretty decent finish. But it's late, and I'm cold, so I'll get back to this, not tomorrow, but soon. Hey, what does this light mean? It's a couple days later, and I'm halfway done with lapping valves. It's looking pretty good-ish, except for that exhaust one, which I don't really want to talk about. Anyway, I just wanted to give you a quick look at what this should look like when you're done. You're looking for a nice, consistent, shiny surface around the entire seat, and you want to see something similar on the valve. Of course, the camera won't focus on it, but anyway, you're looking for a nice, consistent ring. In some cases, you'll see one very shiny line, and you want to see that line go all the way around. This is a horrible mess. Do make sure you keep the grinding compound out of your valve guides. If you're not careful, this compound gets absolutely everywhere, so make sure you're not using great gobs of the stuff. You just want a nice coating on the valve there. Pop it in. You can hear the grit of that stuff. Now this compound smooths out as you use it. This is actually supposed to be multi-grit. Back in the bad old days, I would use the coarse and then finish off with the fine, but now we just have this stuff. You can hear as you're lapping them in, it'll be coarse, and then it becomes less coarse. With the drill, this is very obvious, so the technique I use is spin some, lift it off the seat, reseat it, and then you can hear it gets coarse again. If you wanted to be like all zen about this, you could use the old school suction cup to spin them. but I like the drill. I've almost got the head clean enough for paint now, and I did kind of resurface it here with a hand sander and some 100 grit. Looks pretty nice. Now this is interesting. Recall the only visible goofiness on the head gasket was back here. Back here at number 6, you can still see the trails from that gasket after I cleaned it. Almost nowhere else is it as visible as back there. So one has to wonder if the head is shaped like this, there's excessive pressure right there, and then the rest of the head is not really sealing. It would be great if I could have it checked and maybe even resurfaced by a machinist, but today is not that day. The head's clean and pretty much ready for paint, but I'm going to go ahead and ruin that again by getting it oily, installing the valve gear. Now I've chosen to change the valve springs. I'm not changing the cam yet, but it will be eventually. And I'm probably going to be revving this thing a little bit higher than it was meant to be. The fact is, the factory spring is underwhelming, so those are gone. What I'm using instead are a set of stock replacement 340 springs with dampers. These are supposed to have about a 120-pound load on the seat. That is when closed. And when the valve is opened, they should go up to like 280 pounds or so. That'll be great for the performance cam this thing will eventually have. It might be a little overkill for stock, but in the interest of valve train stability, I think now is the time to do this. I will be cleaning up and reusing the valve retainers and keepers from the Slant 6, and I need to go dig up some valve seals. In case you're wondering about valve guides, I do check these by plugging this end with my finger and pulling on the valve lightly. There should be suction, and I did have that on every guide in this head. There was one exhaust guide that was a little looser than others, but I still had suction, and I choose to ignore that. I've got more V8 parts here. I didn't order Slant 6 valve seals because I knew I'd have some of these. They do seem to fit. The valve stem diameter, of course, is the same. These do fit over that chunk of the casting right there. It's a tight fit. You want to make sure to use this style for intake and the basic umbrella for the exhaust. And of course, I'll have some extras left over. These were stolen from a headset for a brand new engine I'm going to be building that already has new seals in the head, so there you go. Anyway, I'm going to pop all of those in, and then one by one, I'll install these new springs with freshly cleaned valve gear. Well, that sucks. 3 really badly leaking exhaust valves, 1 slightly leaking exhaust valve, and 1 intake valve. The idea here is you put fluid behind the valves and it should stay put. So apparently I didn't spend enough time on these exhaust seats. And I knew they didn't look amazing, but that's just bad. I considered the possibility of debris on the seats, so I sprayed air in each one of these, a ton more brake clean, and then I tapped each valve with a hammer, covered myself and the floor and everything else in brake clean. The 1 intake valve that was a little leaky, now fixed. But those 4 exhaust valves are bad. That one's the worst one. In fact, see, it's dried off. That's because all the brake clean's already gone. That one is the least worst, but it still leaks. So I guess we're going back in there. Note, all 4 valves in the front 2 cylinders are very good, although there is slow leakage from exhaust number 1 and from intake number 1 as well. I mean, I'll take less than 100%, but some of these are just bad. In fact, when I was blowing these off, you could see vapor coming up through the ports. And when I drop a light in here, you can see it. Not great. You can see that one very clearly. As I was lapping these, I was getting a nice pattern up here, not so much down here. It looked like it was producing a ring, and I figured, that's gonna be good enough. No, it is not gonna be good enough. So now I'll be undoing all my hard work. I'll have to pull all of these valves because I don't think I can get a drill alongside a spring that's installed. And we'll keep going on those exhaust seats. I stand corrected. I totally can fit the drill here. So I started on number 6 exhaust, and it has gotten better, like a lot better. But it still leaks slightly, so I'm still not done. You can see the spots, the like little black spots in that seat. And that, of course, is the area where it's leaking. It's really hard to light this. There you go. Yeah, see, most of the seat looks great. Just that little area at the bottom, not so great. But it is shrinking. It's getting better and better. I'm going to be here for a while, I think. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know on what planet that ever would have been okay. So instead of installing this cylinder head tonight, it'll be way more of this tomorrow. I can't wait. In case it's not immediately obvious, the reason the seal around these valves is so important is compression. In fact, this is the main place we could lose compression. As the piston's coming up, if these valves don't fully seat, the air and fuel charge that's been drawn into that cylinder can partially escape. And that's just throwing away power for no reason, especially after we've done all this work to get extra air in there with the turbo. It's the next day, and that one's good. So I've got a couple more boo-boos to remedy and we'll be good to go. I did notice a very slight amount of leakage around these intake valves. That was overnight. Yeah, it's not ideal, but I can't spend my whole life on this. Number 2, good enough. This one was the absolute worst by far, but I finally got it. Boop. It's a long time later. The exhaust valve here in number 3, I think it took more grinding than all 3 of those other leaky valves. That seat was just terrible. Like, terrible. I don't know what I was thinking just giving that a pass the first go around. There is now actually a continuous line all the way around that seat. I'm finally ready to fully reassemble, clean this thing again, and then paint it. I do want to point out, this engine ran kind of okay with those horrible valve seats. I have to wonder what it's going to run like now. Better, I hope. Don't worry about that, that's fine. Just a little fire. Stop it! It's not just good, it's good enough. It probably isn't good enough, but you know, I've never been one of those perfectionist guys when it comes to painting engines. First, you'll note I pretty much don't mask anything. A little bit of paint under your valve cover, a little bit of paint in your ports. Yeah, it's not going to be a problem. If you're anal retentive and you want everything to look perfect, well, go right ahead and mask off the valve cover surface, or maybe even put a painting valve cover on there. I've done that in the past. But right now, I can't be bothered. I'm going to slap some paint on this thing and then go prep the block. I've made it a rule to paint everything I touch on this car. Not to paint it well, just to paint it. This is not going to be 100%. I'm going to get this block as clean as I can. Obviously, I want to keep the main chunks out of the oil, so I've got some paper set in there to try and catch everything. I'll be vacuuming, I'll be wiping, I'll be doing my best here, but it's never 100%. You're always going to have a little bit of debris in places you don't want, and you kind of just have to accept that. Block prepped. Blew out all the head bolt holes. They were full of nasty goo. I lightly sanded this with the same 100 grit I used on the head. I think that's fine for cleaning. Definitely not digging in anywhere, but it's looking pretty good. I did then wipe it down with a rag soaked in brake clean. By rag, of course, I mean one of these. They leave behind a little bit of fuzz, but not too bad. I scraped as much horrible carbon deposit stuff off of the pistons as I could, cleaned the bores, blew these out with air. I could probably do that one more time. But yeah, it's pretty much ready for assembly. Head gasket. I've done a lot of reading and watching videos and such about this, and I've known the whole time that a composite Fel-Pro rebuilder gasket, like I use in everything else, probably not what I want to use for the turbo slant. I was looking for a steel shim type gasket, and that's kind of what I ended up with. The factory type single layer steel, it's kind of hard to come by these days. They're in short supply. This is some random cheap gasket that I found on the internet somewhere. I don't even know where. Maybe eBay. There are a couple little boo-boo marks I'm slightly concerned with, but in general, it looks pretty good. And I think that's going to be tough enough to hold up to whatever boost I could throw at this thing. This is an MLS type gasket. It's 3 layers of steel. You can see the one big core layer and then 2 outer layers. Again, I don't know who makes this. I do know it needs a good bit of cleaning and some mild repair. I may hit this with copper coat as well. I haven't decided yet. To clamp the head down, factory bolts were never going to be up to the task. So I ordered some studs. I almost got the Amazon special that's like $55, but they didn't look quite right in the picture. So I opted for the actual ARP. This box of studs cost me like 95 bucks, but it's the right way to go. It's the ultimate option for clamping your head down, and when you're dealing with boost, that's what you want. Bent up a couple areas, chipped off some big gnarly chunks of paint from whatever they put on this thing at the factory, and then cleaned it with some brake clean, and I'm pleased with this. Now note, this is not like the modern type MLS gaskets. It's got a big gnarly fire ring, so I'm hopeful that that will work well with the finished surface that we have. For the type of MLS gasket you see in a modern application, your surfaces need to be finished to a certain specification for them to work. I'm hopeful we don't have that problem here. Copper spray gasket, high temp sealant. I've now coated our head gasket with it. Also, my hand. I'm gonna let that set for a little bit and then we'll drop this on the engine. Now those rebuilder gaskets I was talking about a bit ago, the typical blue Felpro units, those are Teflon coated. That Teflon helps to sink into any little imperfections in your head surfaces and hopefully seal them up. This gasket had no such coating, although it was painted at the factory, so I figured this was probably a good insurance policy. Another great use for copper coat. Rule number 1, never reuse head gaskets. But rule number 2, if you do reuse head gaskets, hit them with this stuff. It'll help to replace that missing Teflon. And now we're here. I think I mentioned that Slant 6 cylinder heads are heavy, so make sure you've got an Allen to help you with that part. Again, we kind of had to wedge it into the exhaust manifold and then set it down on the gasket, and then finally installed the ARP studs. These get snugged down by hand only. You do not reef those down with any tool, but make sure they're fully seated. You can see these are all even, so I'm happy with that. Head fasteners are together and torqued. Make sure if you're going to use these ARP thingies, you use their lube on both sides of the washers and on the threads there, and use their torque specs, which in this case, 80 foot-pounds. I got there in 3 stages, something like 30, 55, 80. Before putting the valve gear back together, I'm reinstalling the spark plugs and tubes. I feel like that'll help keep the push rods separated. I'm doing this by cleaning them and installing new spark plug tube seals from Matman's Mopars. Plugs and tubes, done. It looks so crisp against that red. Rockers are back on. Note, I gave them a quick spray off. I did not break these down and fully clean them. I can't be bothered. Now I'm going to go through and make sure the adjustments are still good. There's a good chance they won't be with the new head gasket because, of course, the position of the head could change ever so slightly. So we'll make sure with a couple feeler gauges of correct size. Good news, bad news. Good news. Our new head gasket is significantly thicker. And that's good news because it lowers the compression, and that's good for boost. That'll be a party bad news. I have to adjust every one of these a fair bit. Note, I am adjusting them cold. I mean, they're way, way off. I don't have much of a choice. But don't tell the good people of slant6.org that I'm doing this. They want to see you doing it with the engine hot and running, and that's great. I've done that before, although not on a Slant 6. But today is not that day. Alan got some footage of me adjusting the valves and installing the valve cover. Do note, I don't use those crazy scientific techniques like counting 90 degrees on the balancer and spinning the engine part way and then checking this valve and that valve. I just spin it over gradually, bit by bit, and check every valve individually 2 or 3 times. It's worked well for me so far. Also, don't mind the horrible washing machine noises. Open. That is an intake. Wow. That's probably starting to close. Both on. Sure. There you go. For science, I should probably start it with the new stuff and no thermostat housing, but I don't want to. I don't want to know. Ta-da! A ton of stuff has happened, and other than intercooler and piping, we're basically right back where we were pre-head gasket job. I started this on Monday. It's Friday now. I think I spent 3.5 days on it, but I'm not done. I'm gonna try and get a radiator, intercooler, and transmission cooler in, mounted, and full of various fluids. I don't know about you, but I'm getting excited. Also hungry. I'll be right back. Transmission cooler is mounted. I made up 2 little L brackets. They're actually cut out of a ruined sway bar link off the back of a mail truck. I drilled 2 holes in the rad support to pass the hoses through, and they run right over here. It's mounted to those brackets with 2 of those zip strip things. It's attached to the car, so we're good. I'm gonna make some people sad now, but it has to be done. It just has to be done. This thing cannot stay yellow. I don't want to see it back behind the 63 Valiant grill, all yellow and obnoxious. I thought it was going to be more gold. It looked more gold in the pictures. And gold would have been awful too. But yellow, definitely awful. So we're going to give it the blackout treatment, and hopefully no one will ever notice it back there. Oh, so much better. So much less yellow. Also stinky. While the ink dries on the intercooler, I've got the radiator back in its home. I think I've decided what I'm going to do is 2 bolts at the top on both sides and probably just call that good. I do have some pieces of rubber that I was thinking about attaching to like little cradle things to sit on the bottom. I probably should do that. Anyway, I'm probably just going to mount it with 2 bolts on the top on each side and call it good. So now I'm working on radiator hoses. I need an upper, which will be shaped kind of like that, and a lower, which needs to be shaped like this to dodge the V-belt. It has to turn rearward and then turn around and go forward again. It also needs to be 1.5 inches on one end and 1.75 inches on the other. That may well end up being a flex hose, but we'll see. For some reason, it's 7:57 p.m., so I'm gonna have to go to the faraway parts store. This actually looks remarkably nice, if I do say so myself. Still need to make up hanging brackets for that as well. 1 hour and half a spicy chicken pizza later, I'm back with hoses. They don't really fit right, but I did get them, so that's something. Okay, I may have stumbled into almost greatness. This hose does kind of sort of match the shape of the timing cover area, and it kicks rearward, away from the belt. Tons of room to the belt, which the old hose did not have. This is not quite the right angle, and this end is supposed to be 1.75 inches, and it's like 1 3/8 inches. So I'm gonna have to lubricate that and hopefully stretch it onto the radiator. Also, I'll probably have to trim it a little bit and bend it, but I think this will kind of, sort of, maybe almost work. Oh, it's so much better. So much less yellow. Made up some intercooler mounts. Guess what they came out of? That's right, the other sway bar link. It's officially the most together it's ever been by quite a bit. The upper radiator hose barely reaches. The lower, I'm still negotiating with. I've got 3 bolts mounting the radiator. It actually seems pretty good. So I'm gonna leave it with that for now. Now remember, this is the cheapest cold air kit money could buy on the internet. It wasn't even $30, and it kind of sort of works and kind of sort of fits the turbo. You'll notice the filter is in front of the radiator. What I'd have to do here is kind of negotiate that positioning and then build a box to keep those intake air temperatures down. That's a future Jamie problem. I've already done it once on that red 71 Challenger, so I could definitely do it again. Oh yeah, a commenter told me they used one of these plastic Dodge hats for their turbo setup and it exploded into little pieces at 10 PSI. I'm really looking forward to that. It's 11 o'clock on a Friday. I just want to hear this thing run. Well, I wasted an hour of my life stretching that lower hose onto the radiator. It's all ugly and horrible looking, but it is connected and I bet it'll hold coolant. Oh, come on. It's midnight, but it's full of coolant. Oh, so I think that means we have to find out. I have not wired the fans yet. Also, straight pipe, so I can't run it for too long. Still can't believe the fuel gauge works. Huh. No crank signal. Might not be enough battery. Aha! It's alive again. And probably won't idle. Maybe. Oh, no. Yeah. Every time. I don't know why, but every time. Someone's doing burnouts in the distance. Or killing a chicken. Okay, it's getting better. It seems to be learning. And the exhaust doesn't even smell mega rich, which it always has before. So I'm gonna call that a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, the controller thing is still totally dead. Burning crap off the exhaust, filling the shop with smells. It's something. Little victories. The timing's a totally random guess, but it's almost pulling 20 inches of mercury at idle, so that's something. Cooling system built pressure. I don't think the thermostat ever actually opened, but it ran for a while and idled down. Most of the smells are going away. As much as I'd love to go for like a little test rip real quick, I just know it would be disappointing, so we'll save that for tomorrow. It's the next day and my neck is just killing me. Probably due to like everything that I've done recently. Also my right hand. It's not great if I'm honest. As has been the case at every other juncture with this car, there is a lot left to do. A lot. Like so much. The giant transmission leak, that's a problem. Cooling fan relays kind of need to happen. But of course, I'm not sure they'll actually work, and the controller for the atomic system to get in there and change the temperatures and stuff is totally dead. So that is a problem. I've actually acquired some nice parts to ungarbage the back of this car. So there's another job. I'll air that up again, I suppose. Probably should order some tires for this car. Oh yeah, I just remembered all the brakes are garbage. I'm actually planning to put disc brakes on this car if you can believe that, but that's definitely way off in the future. I need to reconfigure my throttle setup. In fact, it'll probably end up having an aftermarket cable like this for the throttle with their bracket that holds both, and that'll be nice. Currently, this thing gets like 42% throttle opening. I said all that to say, there's an insane amount of stuff left to do on this car, but I just have to know what it drives like. I have to. I guess the battery didn't charge. Really? Why? Why this again? Thank you. Oh. Might be a little rich. Dude, when I brought this thing in here, it still stopped. Where'd the brake fluid go? Okay, I know where it went. Rear right wheel cylinder, but still, they were fine. Dude, it's the 63 Dart convertible all over again. Okay, even though it ran almost perfect last night, today it's super rich and it won't idle again. Did it learn nothing? The temperature sender should actually be temperature sending at this point. And I was showing like 19 inches of mercury vacuum, which means there can't be any horrible vacuum leaks. Yes, I'm well aware these intakes are kind of garbage and it's probably porous. I need to do a pressure check. That's this whole other thing. Why will it not just idle? Oh yeah, I just remembered someone complained about running this water pump with no water in it. Oh, you're gonna ruin the seal. Yeah, okay. I'm about to set this thing on fire. Who remembers this video? I'm about to set that atomic system right next to that on the shelf. You know, after modifying it with a hammer, of course. Fixed. The good news is the floor won't freeze now. And none of that hit the ground. But only because it didn't make it back here. That's it. I'm driving this car and there's nothing it can do to stop me. Do I even own brake fluid? Did you hear that crappy Fury in the distance? That was cool. There we go. 3 dots. Perfect. Almost all gone. 1 master cylinder's worth left. New brakes. What a good idea. Big brake pedal. Almost something. It chooches. The tune is just embarrassingly bad. Temperature's good. That's great news. Pretty sure the coolant's slightly low now. It's just so rich when you hit the throttle. Oh, it does all the stuff. I saw 7 pounds on the gauge. And when the boost comes in, oh, it runs minty. It's just the rest of the time that it's horrible. Also, the throttle's sticky. Thermostat open. Okay, it's threatening to get warm. Woo! Yep, thermostat open. Yeah. Obviously, we're cooking all kinds of things. Smells slightly like burning gaskets and oil fumes, of course. That's normal. So yeah, good news, bad news. Bad news. I'm going to smash the atomic system with a hammer. Good news. That is a working Turbo Slant 6. I saw about 7 pounds on the gauge, which is exactly what the wastegate is set for. That means the manual boost controller is indeed fully closed right now. If we opened it somewhat, we'd get more boost, but obviously we are not ready for that. Even on 7 pounds, when the boost comes in, it is just ridiculous. Well, I just remembered I have no idea where the timing is. I didn't hear any pinging. I think it's fine. Essentially what's happening right now is as soon as you crack the throttle, this thing just goes super mega rich. Now, if the stupid little controller thing would work, I could take out some of the accelerator pump and power valve fueling and probably sort that out. But it doesn't, so I can't. Even if the controller did work, my previous experiences with trying to tune it naturally aspirated, well, it didn't go well anyway. It's gonna be an uphill battle to get this system to work right. So for now, I'm just gonna step back and admire the fact that I have built a working Turbo Slant 6, and it drove, and I'm probably gonna watch that clip of it chooching over and over on a loop for the next 2 hours. I did notice the blow-off is not blow-offing, so that'll require some adjustment. The turbo flutter sounds awesome, but I don't want to break stuff. Now that this is finally a working turbo car, I can finally reveal this. This is the 1963 Plymouth Valiant Signet Turbo. My thanks to Randy and his son for designing and printing these for me. I put on an APB in an earlier Valiant video saying this is exactly what I wanted to put on the fender, and now it's here. Don't mind the tape job. I did that at like midnight last night. Haven't done that one yet. Well, I guess that's it for the Turbo Slant for now. It finally works. Kinda. I think we learned a lot about the Atomic EFI. Everyone told me I probably shouldn't use it, and everyone was right. But again, it was free, so I'll probably be investigating other fuel system options. That and everything else I've mentioned. Future video. For now, as ever, thank you very much for watching. And remember, the Turbo Slant goes shh, and then eventually, I'm looking forward to it. Oh yeah, a big thank you to my members, especially my gold members. You know who you are. I really appreciate you.